Well, greetings, art lovers. Once again, I take it you're still sequestered after several weeks have been sequestered to begin with. We hope you're all safe and well and enjoying whatever you're doing at home. We're going to be talking about some of the things that we've been doing during this shutdown. If you listened to our last podcast, which we called Safe Haven, this is sort of following on from that, because we realised after we'd finished that there were still other things that we could have talked about. So join us this week for Sequestered, Part 2. And we're going to be talking with David and Connie, as always. We've had our coffee, our morning coffee, although I've only had one cup, so I'm not really raring to go. But I know Connie, who's probably on her 8th cup for this morning, is always able to contribute something really good and very thought-provoking. So we'll go to her in a minute. I just wanted to start off with a theme that I mentioned last time, which was I hate watching the TV and all the information. It's just too much for me to take in. It makes me anxious, and it doesn't help to give me this information. So I really like to just look around. I'm fortunate to live in a home. It used to belong to David's mum and dad, and so we have artwork all over the house, in every room, on every wall. And it's nice to move the paintings around because you suddenly see them differently when they're in a different position. And I feel that it's really helpful to me because I find it more uplifting to look at something that somebody has created, several moments in time, because they probably stood there for 4 or 5 hours to paint something, and you get the feeling that you're sort of with the artist. I also just got some belongings from England after my mum passed away last year, and so some of the things that arrived were paintings and embroideries that my mum and dad did. And so when I look at art, it's not just the painting. I don't find it easy to dissect something right away and analyse why a painting is good. I know I probably should do, but I like to get the overall feel of it first. And so among the things that arrived was a watercolour of my mum's that she did of Richmond Castle, because Richmond was where my grandfather came from. And so she painted this scene from the river, looking up the bank to the castle. And although some people might feel, well, it's not a great painting, to me it has so much in it because it was filled with love and memories. And my mum was a good amateur painter. She always felt she wasn't a great painter because she liked to be able to copy things, but she couldn't do them out of her own volition, looking at a scene and then painting it. She had trouble with that. So she always put her abilities down because she didn't think that she was very good at this. But to me, having this artwork on the wall and around me, together with David and his family's artwork and some of the pieces his parents collected, this to me is helping me through this sequestration period. So, Connie, let me ask you, how do you go about, I know that you're painting, that you have a studio you can go to. But when you're at home, you have artwork on the walls from your grandmother as well.
Right.
I remember seeing Ira Jem Merriman. I thought that was the greatest name. And she was a very good painter, and she inspired you as a youngster to.
She was good.
To work.
She definitely inspired me.
Okay, so when you have, what makes you choose a painting that you want to put on the wall at home?
Boy.
What do you see?
It's interesting because we change our artwork all the time. I think my husband's somewhat flabbergasted because sometimes he'll see a frame on the wall with no painting on in it. He'll go, "What happened to that one?" And it'll either be in my studio, I'm reworking it, or it got sold. And he's also gotten to the point where he'll say, "Oh my God, I thought you said that you gave me that painting." And I go, "No." We need money for the fire.
Well,
Firewood.
I know that feeling. I had there was a painting that David did for me of the archway at Bolton Priory, and it was a beautiful piece, and he inscribed it to me. And then somebody came in, and he wanted a pair of small paintings as a gift for his daughters. And so they were looking round, he picked one out, and then he saw this one of Bolton Priory, and he said, David, how about this one? Well, I inscribed that to Judy. Well, she won't mind, will she? So there they were, they took my inscription off and goodbye painting.
Yeah, goodbye painting.
Yeah, but that's the trouble with living with an artist, because the paintings come and go. And
I think they do.
Sometimes the good have to make way for the better. You can't hang on. If I held on to every painting of David's that I liked, we'd have starved to death long ago.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
But that's a big help when they rescue those paintings from the
I was
from
going
the
to say.
surgeon's scalpel, because some surgeries don't always. So
About well.
Yeah, no, I remember visiting Don Stone. I think you had to interview Judy, Don Stone, and we were in his studio. And most of my friends, Connie's one of the only friends I have that talk shop. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about painting. And it's not easy. Most of my friends want to talk about sports or something like that.
Civil War.
So there was Don Stone, and you were pulling it right out of him, and he had a beautiful studio, and all his paintings were framed on the walls, and so when asked the question, what is painting, he said it's a puzzle to be solved. And I thought, wow, that's a great definition.
Nice.
And he, as an example, he went over and lifted the frame up, and the painting wasn't attached in the frame. It was just resting in the frame on the wall. He'd just pull it out, bring it over to his easel. He says, I see what's wrong with this. And he'd start working on it a little bit. So I think all us painters are in that camp of...
I think so, too.
We think we can make it better.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a good idea to take our spouse's recommendations. Why don't you do a new one?
Put the brush down and step away.
There
was the other memorable occasion when I came back from grocery shopping. It was on a Monday. David was on his day off from the Guild of Boston Artists. This is when we were first married. And I came in, and blow me, he'd got his palette out, and he was working on a painting that was signed, framed, had been exhibited. And I just saw this. I just wanted to alter this bit. And he was working on it in the frame. It's like, I always thought that artists did a painting, and that was it. They concentrated on one painting. When that was finished, they'd put that one away and start a new painting. I didn't realise that you'd have so many on the go. David, I know, was doing a winter piece, couldn't finish it that winter season, and therefore put it away for the next 12 months till he could go out again and work on it.
Another winter,
as outdoor painters, you must find it difficult to...
Well, not even outdoor painters. George Innes' son, in the great book that his son wrote about his father, George Innes was in the studio working, big barn, and his son Georgie comes in, and little Georgie Jr. Was hanging around, and his father said, Georgie, why don't you go out and play? It's a nice day out there. Well, it was the middle of winter, and it was cold, but Georgie went out to play. And he noticed that his dad was working on a winter painting, up on the canvas, and he left, and he came back 3 hours later, walked in the studio. His father was cleaning up, and he says, he looks around to see where's the painting is, and he realizes it's gone. The winter scene is left. So he couldn't figure out why, and then he realized his father had the habit of reworking a painting, and not just touching it up, but repainting a whole painting like somebody else I know does, right? Changes it entirely. And so he went around looking for the wettest painting he could find, the one that glistened most, and it was an autumn scene. It was totally different than the winter scene. And that was George Innes to a T in the studio. If he just couldn't make head and a tail out of what was going on in front of him, he just changed it. I mean, he was always inspired by nature, but 9 times out of 10, he's using his imagination. And a brilliant, maybe America's finest landscape painter. I don't know.
That's
it'd
fabulous.
be personal, but that brings up the point of us reading.
Yeah, I was
during
just
these tough times,
that was a great biography.
And great art books. Now's the time to do it. There's no other time that you're going to it's springtime. You all want to go out and plant the flowers in the garden, but we're sort of trying to be good with everybody and hold our own. And if everybody does it, we'll all be in better shape. But what's the matter with picking up a good art book and being inspired?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, Judy's written 8-9 books on the history of art on Cape Ann.
I've lost count. I mean, what can I say?
Articles, art, everything. There's a great 2 great articles in the American Art Review that Judy's written this month.
They're worth reading, even though the exhibitions aren't going to go ahead because we're shut down.
Yeah.
But they will go ahead later. The Guild exhibition will be on next year, the same time of the year. And the Rockport auction, I believe, is going to be rescheduled.
Like
so
in
hang
fall?
on to your I think so.
They're collector's
but I wouldn't
items.
swear to it. Yes, so hang on to your art reviews because they will be valid. Sometime in the future, these articles will represent what's going to be said, hopefully.
And I think that's rather than sitting and panicking about what's going on, and don't turn on the TV set. I mean, you can make your imagination is filled much more with greater things than the TV will offer you. I know neither one of you girls watch television at all very much. I probably watch twice as much as you do in a year's time,
in a day's time.
So it's there's nothing on there that's uplifting. So why
Not at
not
the
pick up a
moment.
good art book?
Yeah.
Judy's written several on great artists: Aldro Hibbard, Paul Strisick, Anthony
Teamy.
Teamy. Great books to pick
I
up
did
and
the
read.
Tiny Teamy book.
And that just also goes with the echoing of the sort of what we were talking about a little bit yesterday with the idea of pulling it out of the mist and pulling it out of the fog. And painters came to Cape Ann, I believe, because there were natural compositions here. You know,
I agree.
not
And
only
also
harbor.
the color notes, I felt like the sky has that mist of a sort of rose doré. It's a little bit like
Rose story, I'll have to remember that.
but it has that wonderful rose quality that's in the ether,
Yes,
sort of.
yeah.
And I love that about Cape Ann.
Yeah.
And it's special and it's really unique to Cape Ann.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when the painters did come here, it seemed like their color key was always uplifting. Metcalf was painting, I think, out in the Southwest and doing some things after he returned from France and his influence with Gavrenet and Monet influenced him, and he came here. But it wasn't until he arrived in Gloucester that his color palette just went soaring into a higher pitch. I know he hung around with Child Hassam, which probably helped a little bit too.
Child Hassam did take credit for teaching Metcalf.
Oh, really? He did? Yeah.
That technique.
Yeah, but it was just
Really?
it was right.
That's
it was here in Gloucester.
Yeah.
It was that. It was the essence of the light, as Connie said, that rosy light that's here. And in those days, I mean, they didn't need rose-colored sunglasses because they were visualizing it. But so we as painters gain the inspiration from the past, from these other painters.
I think there's a lot to be taken from painters who've. You can see, obviously, because these works of art are still valuable today.
Yes.
And you like to think that when you're painting, that somebody 100, 150 years from now are going to appreciate your works as well.
Perhaps.
And that they will have that that longevity, is it? I don't know. I think I feel very fortunate to live in an area like this because there is so much history. I mean, I didn't know anything about art history until I got married and came over here. I liked to look at paintings, but I really didn't understand. I mean, Roger tried to teach me as much as he could, but it took me about 5 years to really understand what a value was and what it meant. And how to apply it. I mean, it made perfect sense when he would tell me this, and he would demonstrate on my canvas board at the workshop. And then as soon as he walked off, it was like, yeah, but how do I apply it? It's all very well him applying it, but and it just took a long time but once I got it, I understood it. I mean, I can't paint, but I'm really good at the theory these
Well, no, you
days.
can paint. We had a family FaceTime call on Sunday, and Judy's family in England and our family here. It was really nice. That really is a wonderful thing too, just to talk to family. And we all came away. We all said it was a great time, so we're hoping to do it again. But one of our nephews
My nephew, yeah.
is Adam had won this painting that they thought was my dad's. And when I looked at it, I said, no, that feels like, gee, it's not my dad's. It looks more like it's English. And then the truth came out that it was one of Judy's paintings that she had done in his art class. It was really very nice. I wanted to instantly call Adam up and make a deal with him.
Yeah. And get that painting back.
But, speaking of reading, Connie, you've been doing a lot of reading.
Yeah, I have.
About,
well, a variety of, absolutely about art. One of the more intriguing books that I have is called The Age of Insight, and it was by this guy named Eric Kandel, and he's a medical doctor, a neuroscientist, who was also born and raised in Austria, in Vienna, and then he moved to New York City when he was like maybe 18 or something like that. Anyway, and then he became a professor at Columbia University. But this guy, along with, there was Gombrich was one guy, and Ernst, this guy named Ernst Chris. They, both of them had brought together psychology and art, like looking at the psychological implications of our artwork, whether it be landscape painting, interiors, what it is. But it was kind of fascinating. So anyway, Eric Kandel's book on Age of Insight is about, and I believe that, I just want to say that I think we too can create sort of salons, let's say, art salons. And what happened in Vienna in 1900 there were these huge art salons in which they had Gustav Klimt, Egon Schiele, Kokoschka was there, Freud, Karl Moll, but all these people came together, so it was a cross-pollinization, as I would say.
Can you say that?
Can you say it 3 times real fast?
You're talking about they actually met together and
yes!
talked.
There was this woman that Klimt painted her. Judith is one of the paintings. But this woman was a real socialite. I can't remember her name right off bat.
I can picture the painting.
But yes,
yeah.
But what happened is that she was fascinated with and was in touch with all these people. So she had Freud in there. This guy Rodzinski, he was actually Freud's. He was the head of the medical director in Vienna. But anyway, all these people started talking together. And what happened is that the artists became involved and interested in the psychological underpinnings of their paintings. Mm-hmm. And how could they display certain things. Now, according to Freud was coming in with a lot of what he considered were sexual implications. The sex instinct was involved in some of his work around psychopathology. Mm-hmm. But the artists took this as that they could put what maybe they were thinking about in terms of body language, certain kinds of things, and it made it very provocative. Some of their artwork was quite provocative. Mm-hmm. Also I would say in Klimt's work, which you saw all those little designs and everything, they said that those designs are really cell biology. So what he was doing was he was trying to indicate what a cell looked like, what a neuron looked like, and that is also and he stylized them and created these flat, two-dimensional kind of designs as the robes of these people's their robes
Yeah.
in their portraits.
Yeah.
So I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's
But now,
interesting.
Judy, I want to ask you about what these things that you were going to talk about at the Cape Ann Museum, at some of these other places, and this too is about art history and how we sort of the cross pollination of things.
Yeah, I think you can learn a lot from art history. I mean, I'm interested in the people who created the art as well as the artworks that they create. So the Cape Ann Museum was a gallery talk on the exhibition A Father and Son's Journey in Paint, featuring Tom Nicholas and T.M. Nicholas. And I thought that was it's a great show. It's a pity that it's probably got to come down by the time this sequestration is all over. But one of the things that struck me in particular about that exhibition, and maybe some of our listeners here will have been down to the Cape Ann Museum to see it before we got stuck here. How many of those canvases that they did were square? Because I think a square canvas is very difficult to design, and yet both Tom Senior and TM love to do these square canvases, and I find it interesting because it's then becomes more about the design than just the picture. And of course, they both have such a different technique. Tom Senior painted a lot out of doors. He was a good teacher for many years, and then he also liked to observe things. He'd do numerous sketches, and then he would go back into the studio and work those sketches, and then through his imagination put these different elements together, and he has a very refined finish, quite different to TM, who's out on location and doing what would you say? So in
plein air.
Yeah.
Well, impasto surface.
All in one go.
Yeah.
Impasto.
Really, finely detailed paintings when he's finished them, just fabulous. I mean, he has 2 Venice pieces in this show that are spectacular. I mean, you have to see them right in front of you. He also did one of my favourites was the one of the sea turtles that he did. I just thought that was amazing. It was a beautiful painting.
I haven't seen it live.
And yeah, it's like a lot of things. You look at, and this is why
love to
you look
see
at
that.
art history books and you see these paintings, but they're just images, and you can get so many different colour versions. You can have 5 books with the same photo, the same image, and of course the colour looks different in all of them. So you just have to take your best shot at guessing what the true colour of the painting is.
Well, or go to the exhibit.
Or go to the exhibit, which is even better.
Which is
Yeah.
always better. Always
always
means
better.
more. I remember looking at Dennis Bunkers for years in images. And then there was a show at the MFA, and when I went in, my mouth just opened. It just dropped. My jaw was looking at these paintings. Wow. And they came to life in front of me.
Yeah.
Whereas an image is nice. It's very nice in a book, but yeah, and I know you can't go to museums now, but the inspiration that we gather from books, as Connie was talking about the Vienna Secession, and I think his Kendall's book was more about the general psychology of the time, in order to create why all this creativity all at once through architecture, the Art Nouveau sort of thing hit Vienna, you might say, and that was all very much.
But I think he was also trying to make the connection between what we paint has a psychological implication, and it's true for all of them. So they're not just strictly designs, but there's a certain kind of psychology to our paintings that they're not always seen that way, and certainly we're not, when we're out plein air painting, we're not sitting there saying, "Oh, you must be very aggravated," or "You look very happy today,"
Well, it's very
because
funny.
of your palate. Your palate is upbeat.
It's very funny you say that because I find, and I've never found anybody who's out there who was agitated and who set up to paint, that their agitation didn't last very long.
Yes,
It was.
I have to agree.
And I've gone out sick before painting, not feeling well, headache or something like that. And by the end of the session, I forgot all about it.
Yeah.
So painting
that's the
has this
beauty
sort
of
of
painting.
almost
Yeah.
self-hypnotic effect when you're out painting, or even when you're in the studio. I think it's even emphasized more in the studio. Thinking about the Nicholases, Tom Sr., his dad, I thought was much more of a conceptual painter. He took what he observed from nature and then applied it in the studio with his imagination and made a more personal statement, maybe because it was a concept.
Yes.
And Tommy, TM, was outdoors painting what he saw, plein air, what the eye perceives, so maybe a more perceptual painter. And I think that show, in my opinion now, this is, some art critic could come along and throw this out the window, but I saw a big difference between them. But I also saw Tommy needed a little concept in his work, and his dad needed a little percept in his work.
Yeah.
So I think we're all borrowing from these big concepts.
I don't think you have to be stuck in a particular pigeonhole, and you can't. As you say, the cross-pollinization is very important. You need to take something from over here and a bit
Little
from
bees.
over there. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And because who was it? Aldro Hibbard. One of his quotes was, "There is no receipt for being able to paint." And I always thought, what the heck's he talking about, receipt? And I misread it once as recipe, and I thought, well, maybe there's no particular formula, is perhaps what he was trying to say. That you had to know what to do or how to do it, and then you could go out and apply it and change it to your own vision.
I think this is why the psychology in art really applies, because of that. Our day-to-day experience leads us in different directions. And then when we start painting, I think we bring that percept into being and then our own concepts apply with the percept, overlay, and it's like going to see a movie every day that's totally different than the last movie you saw.
Yeah.
And I think that's the experience of doing and it doesn't make it, recipes won't help you anymore.
No,
right.
To learn from another painter because you like the way they paint, well, that might work, but it's really about you discovering your own ways that you want to express in your paintings.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
To paint is because you do go on these experiences.
It also makes it therapeutic because there's a certain, as we were saying just a few minutes ago, certain comfort in, we'll set up, outside or wherever we are, and you get engrossed, you get involved in what you're doing in the moment, and you forget about these other extraneous, events that are happening that are not, they may be troubling, but you want some relief. We need relief.
Yes.
We can get it through meditation, but we can also get it through painting.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a form of meditation.
Oh, it is, yeah. And I think it is. It's soothing.
Yeah, I think it really is too.
And heaven knows we all need a bit of soothing at the moment.
Oh, I think it's very, as Connie said, meditative. Painting. I can remember a person painting and asking me what I'm thinking about while I'm painting. Well, I'm not really thinking of anything in that big general sense. In other words, I'm not worried about the phone bill or the property bill or
You're not
this
thinking about
bill.
what's for supper?
I'm not thinking about what's for supper. I'm not thinking about anything, And so he says, well, what are you thinking about? And I said, I just want to do a good job. If I can do it, just like if you do anything, you want to do a good job, right? Even if it's cleaning the house, it's, brighten the corner, you want to do a good job.
But it's also about being in that moment.
Yes.
Because I think the challenge when we paint is to be in that perceptual moment, of seeing something and trying to render that on your canvas, and that takes a lot of chutzpah, or a lot of brain power, let's
Yes.
say,
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
to do something like that, and in turn, I think it makes us more calm, because we're putting our efforts not into worrying, but into something that's productive.
Well, let's talk
Yeah.
a little bit about yesterday. We did a podcast. The first part of this podcast, we felt it deserved more because during these unusual times that we're dealing with, something new has happened, and it's collective. It's not just
Yeah.
about one individual or a loved one or something like that. This is all of us, and we're all part of this. And if we all pitch in and do the right thing, we'll come out the better. But yesterday we went into the studio and painted, and I think we came away. We're laughing at supper time. We had a
Exactly.
good experience, a very positive experience, and it was very similar to painting out of doors in a landscape. We were doing an interior. But the light came through the window a filtered window at a certain time and created these effects on the floor that were changing in front of us. So we had to make our decision as to where we wanted the lighting effect and where we didn't want it, that sort of thing. And it posed a challenge, but so again, like yesterday, the challenge is out there for all of you artists. I know if you're landscape painters, you're looking out the window saying, well, I think I can go out, and I think they allow you to go out as long as you keep your social distance. But if you're in the studio, try to paint something in your own home. It's
Right.
very
I
rewarding.
agree.
You've been doing this, Connie.
Yeah.
You did 2 nice interiors around turn of the New Year.
Yeah, exactly.
Turn of the century, were you going to say then?
No, I didn't. I was going to say turn of the century. But I think in books you can find a lot of, not just looking at the pictures. By the way, my teacher Ives Gamble refused us. We weren't supposed to look at color imaging, for the very reason that Judy pointed out, that if you saw Winslow Homer's breezing up in this art book, it looked reddish. If you saw it in this art book, it looks bluish.
Yeah.
If you saw it in this art book, it looked grayish, So which was the true color? And not until you got in front of the painting, after all the restoration processes, that you saw the painting for where it was. So my teacher would forbid us to look at images in color.
Here, do you want to
Well,
carry
it
on?
was all of us students wanted to see these beautiful new color images of, what Paxton, what Charles Hassan was doing. We wanted to see Jerome's original work in color, and all these color books were coming out. But our teacher forbid us to see this, So it was interesting, and I think I did learn a big lesson then. That sometimes we can't believe in the images that we see. And I know a lot of portrait artists will go by a black and white image and then just take color. If they have to do a portrait from a photograph, they'll take color notes onto a card or a piece of canvas board or something like that from the sitter, and then have an image of it. But we have found, Connie and I, doing these interiors, that it's so distorted. Photographs are so distorted to use a photograph to paint from, I really think it sets you off on the whole. It's a worthless journey because the color isn't true,
I agree.
and then the shapes are distorted. The perspective is distorted, and it doesn't see accurately. So I think a lot of those messages that my teacher gave us in those days about looking at black and white versus color. It was very true, but of course, we were students. We wanted to see what we weren't seeing, but everybody else was allowed to look at, but we weren't,
Okay, well, I hate to cut you off there in your prime just as you're getting going, but It's time for us to get ourselves organised. I know David and Connie are anxious to get painting and meditative straight away. So we thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time for another Sight and Insight podcast. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay art related. Thank you and goodbye.